Raging hot like fire till I go under neon with her later.
So, it's been a minute since I've talked about a show I actually like on this channel, and I think it's about time to change that. I kinda hit my threshold with Gossip Girl 2021. I just don't have the energy to hate things right now. That show sucked all the fun out of it. But it's okay, because loving things is also great, and boy, do I like the show we're gonna talk about today. Yes, friends, I'm a couple years late, but I finally sat down to watch the Netflix original series Dead to Me, and I fucking loved it. This show is awesome for many reasons we're gonna talk about in a minute, and it was kind of a surprise. I honestly didn't think I would like it this much. I went in completely blind on this one. I didn't watch any trailers, I had absolutely no idea what the show was even about. The only thing I knew is that Linda Cardellini is in this show, and that was more than enough for me to click play. Linda Cardellini is fucking amazing, and I think Dead to Me proves she's easily one of the most underrated actresses working today. And honestly, I'm of the opinion that not enough people talk about Dead to Me. It's kind of underrated, it deserves way more love. The show is weirdly unique, it's super original, and it has quite a beautiful story. Like, it's not perfect, we'll talk about that too, but honestly, it's one of those shows where the good outweighs the bad so much that it doesn't really matter, and it doesn't really bother me.
I miss you. Just wanted to say that. Okay, fine. It's trying a thing. Fuck you too.
So Dead to Me is the story of Jen, a real estate agent in California and mother of two who just lost her husband Jeff in a tragic hit and run. When we meet her, she is still trying to come to terms with his death. She's angry and in pain, she's harassing the police to find who killed her husband, and she's just desperately trying to keep her life together. She's kinda lonely, she doesn't really have friends, and she doesn't like people all that much. So she joins a grief support group to try and make sense of her new reality, and that is where she meets Judy, a very strange woman who recently lost her fiancé to a heart attack. Against all odds, the two form a unique bond and they support each other through their grieving process. For a moment, it seems like life is getting brighter, but things quickly take a darker turn when we realize that Judy is not exactly who she says she is, and her meeting Jen at the group meeting was probably not the beautiful coincidence it appears to be on the surface. Because yes, it turns out that Judy is the person who killed Jen's husband in the hit and run. Honestly, Dead to Me is just so fucking good, it's kinda crazy. It's one of those shows that perfectly walks the line between comedy and drama, and it is great at both. This show can get so dark and emotional in a way that feels very real and impactful, and then a minute later, it's just incredibly funny, but it's never done in a way that's jarring, it always feels totally natural. This show also manages to capture some really complex human emotions, which I always appreciate in a show. There's a lot of subtext here. The story has an extremely realistic take on grief, and it perfectly showcases how it can affect someone that's going through it. And it's all perfectly supported by the amazing characters. Because yes, that is by far the greatest strength of Dead to Me as a show, the character writing, especially when it comes to the two leads, Jen and Judy. The relationship between Jen and Judy is essentially what the show is about. It's the heart of the story, and you feel really conflicted about it because the writers don't play mystery with you. I know me telling you Judy killed Jen's husband sounds like a big spoiler, but it's actually not, like, at all. They don't do this thing where they keep the killer's identity a secret for the finale or anything. No, they tell you Judy did it in episode 1, and that makes the dynamic between the two leads even more intriguing because we, the audience, know something Jen doesn't. So when you see these two getting closer and closer and building a more meaningful bond every episode, and Jen starting to open up to Judy, you can't help but feel a little freaked out. Their friendship is like really well written. They love each other so much you want to root for them, even though you know what Judy did, and you know what she's currently doing is fucking horrible and manipulative, and you know that eventually Jen will find out. So it's almost heartbreaking to look at them building such a deeply profound bond, because in the back of your head, you know it's a ticking time bomb. And it is such an inventive way of creating tension in a show like this.
I wonder you couldn't sleep. There's so much shit in here.
Jen, played by Christina Applegate, who I believe is also an executive producer on the show along with Will Ferrell. She's one of the more interesting characters I've seen on screen in recent years. She's this sarcastic, cold, girl bossy, impatient woman with little to no filter who essentially hates everyone. And while a lot of shows will try to convince you that's just because she's a strong woman, that to me is like not interested in that at all. They make it very clear on several occasions that her attitude is not a show of strength. She's strong in many ways. You definitely see that in the show, but not because of her attitude. Jen is just an asshole. She's a really mean and unpleasant person. It's said more than once that even the people who love her the most don't really enjoy being around her because she's just rude all the time. That doesn't mean you can't sympathize with her on an emotional level, because you do, but that's just what the character is. Jen has pretty serious anger issues. She kind of reminds me of Fleabag's sister Claire. Her default emotion is anger. She is always irritated, she's always angry, and most of the time she doesn't even know why. At first, you kind of feel for her because she just lost her husband and she's trying to cope. Like, of course she's gonna lash out. It's very hard to hold it against her. But later on in the show, it's explained during an argument with another character that she's kind of always been like this. The anger issues were present way before the passing of her husband, and people around Jen are just used to her being irritable and mean.
I have tried to be a good friend to you, but it's not like your issues started the day Ted died. Jen, your anger is untenable, and I don't know how to help you with it. I just know I can't do this anymore.
Everything frustrates her. Everyone frustrates her. She's the type of person who will roll her eyes at you for saying hi to her. I'm not kidding. The show literally opens with her getting annoyed at her neighbor for bringing her food as a show of support after the passing of her husband.
Can't imagine what you're going through.
Well, it's like if Jeff got hit by a car and died suddenly and violently. Like that.
Right. Well, you get that dish back to me whenever you can.
Gonna
There's
get
no
right on
rush.
it.
That is the very first scene of the show. I'm not joking. Jen is cold. But she's not heartless though. Like, I know this sounds like she's the worst person ever, but you do get attached to her as the show goes on because you kind of get to know Jen when she is at her most vulnerable. Like, you can acknowledge that she's an asshole, but you also understand why she is the way she is. She's not an evil person. She's just very flawed, and she's also very proud, so she doesn't always want to admit she's the problem in the situation. And I don't know about you guys, but I personally know people with legitimate anger issues, and I've had conversation with them about that. And I've come to learn how difficult it is for them to deal with on a daily basis. Like, anger issues are no joke. But Jen is also capable of love. She can feel compassion for people. She can be a good friend. And we see that in the show. She also tries really hard to be a better person, but sometimes her bad habits get the better of her. In other words, Jen is a character that just feels very human. Her insecurities get the better of her as well. She feels like she's in over her head. She feels lonely, and she feels like an inadequate mother. Because yes, her kids are not immune from her anger issues. When I tell you Jen is an asshole to everybody, that includes her two boys. There's even an episode where she finds out that her youngest kid is kind of afraid to talk to her and to tell her how he feels about things, because he thinks if he does or says anything that is not what she wants, she's just going to blow up at him, so he's under an insane amount of stress.
What's going on?
It's okay, tell her.
What, hon?
He doesn't want to do it. It's too much for him, but he's scared that you're going to be mad, so.
But also, in that same episode, you see how far Jen is ready to go and what she's willing to do to make her kids happy. You see her going out of her way to exit her comfort zone just to see her son smile, and it's really sweet. And I like that her fundamental flaw is not here in vain. I like that her anger issues are not just a personality trait given to her character just for the fuck of it. It actually has a real impact on the story. I won't spoil it, but there is a point in this show where Jen does something something very bad. But at first, we think she does that very bad thing because she was put in a position where she didn't have a choice. And while we recognize that what she did is awful, we can empathize with her because her back was against the wall. But then, like a couple of episodes later, we find out that Jen lied and didn't do the thing because she didn't have a choice. She was fine, she didn't need to do it at all, but she chose to anyway. She didn't do the bad thing because she had to, she did it because she wanted to. She did it because she was angry. And then a major part of the story moving forward is about her dealing with the consequences of that action catching up to her. And I think that's why Jen is so interesting as a character. You can tell she doesn't want to be like that. You can tell she doesn't take pride in being this short-tempered asshole nobody wants to be around. Like, people just don't like her, and realistically, that's not a good feeling to know that everyone around you just dislikes you. You see every single one of her attempts at being better, but she just can't help herself. And every time she lets that rage take over, it always ends in a catastrophe, and then she is left with guilt she refuses to deal with, and it just gives her anger more and more power. It's this vicious cycle she can't break out of. The best example of that is in season 1, when we find out that the reason Jen's husband was outside in the middle of the night when he was hit by a car and died is because he walked out of the house after a violent argument with Jen, who exploded at him because he didn't want to have sex with her. You learn more things about this situation as the show goes, but essentially, the fight got so bad that her husband just decided to leave the house over being around Jen for one more minute. So he left while Jen screamed at him to never come back. He went on a long walk and was hit by a car and died. So as a result, Jen projects her guilt over that night onto the police officers who were trying to find out who killed her husband in a hit and run. And all of her rage is directed towards them because as long as they don't find the person, she feels responsible for the death of her husband. Because if it hadn't been for her temper, he would not have been outside the moment he was hit by a car. Anger leads to guilt, leads to more anger, and it always ends in catastrophe. That's the cycle.
That night it got heated and I hit him. The last thing I did before he walked out that door was hit him.
Now you add grief to that, and you get quite a toxic cocktail. And that's exactly why Jen's arc is so fucking compelling. It's a very realistic take on grief and the roller coaster of emotions that comes with it. She gets sad, then angry, then empty, then she misses her husband, then she hates him, then she feels guilty for being mad at him, then she feels like she's getting a hang of things, but then something triggers her and she realizes she's still heartbroken. And that roller coaster at times doesn't make any sense, because emotions felt on that level are not exactly logical. It just kinda happens to you. But Jen is a fucking warrior, and despite her having zero control on her situation, she refuses to let herself be defeated. She's incredibly strong. She's the type of person who always gets back up, no matter what, and if not for herself, for her children. In her head, not coming out on top of it all is not even an option. She doesn't think like that. She knows things have to change, but Dead to Me is also a show that hammers in the point that real, meaningful change takes time. You can't just change in the flip of a switch and suddenly be a better person. You have to work for that, and it's gonna take time. And Jen is the perfect example of that. She doesn't know what to do, she doesn't know where to start, she has no idea how to handle anything, but she's determined to power through every single challenge because at the end of the day, that's who she is.
If a butterfly flaps its wings in Japan, doesn't it cause a hurricane in Florida?
I honestly don't know what you're talking
Well,
about.
I've lost the thread, but I'm the butterfly.
And look, while Jen is an amazing character with an awesome arc, in my opinion, she is completely outdone by Judy. I don't have a lot of words to describe how much I love Judy. I think when it comes to flawed characters, she's very hard to beat. She's just so attaching and warm, but she's also kind of a terrible person. She doesn't intend to be though, but she has a knack to dig her own grave with every decision she makes. There's a line in the show that is often repeated. It's kind of a catchphrase. Characters say, "Wherever Judy goes, chaos follows." And it's kind of true. but also extremely accidental, and that's why you feel so bad for her. I think two of the more important traits to describe Judy would be to say she's incredibly naive and impulsive, and it systematically leads her to do bad things on accident. In a way, she's kind of like Tony Stark. She's always trying to do the right thing, but she always ends up doing it the wrong way. Just like Jen, Judy has a vicious cycle she cannot escape. She does a bad thing, then she tries to fix it, but it leads to more problems. She panics and makes impulsive decisions that seem completely insane, but because she's naive, she's convinced it's gonna work, it blows up in her face, and before she knows it, she is so wrapped up in a web of lies that she can barely function anymore.
Sorry. I hope this isn't weird. Can I give you a hug?
No.
Okay.
For example, early in the show, it's explained that Judy met Jen on purpose because she was feeling extremely guilty over, well, you know, killing her husband. So she found out Jen was going to this grief support group and she joined, claiming to be grieving her fiancé Steve. Judy's goal here was to become Jen's friend in order to become a support system in her life and help her because she believes that's how she can make up for what she did, or at least a little bit. It sounds outrageous said like that, but like I said, Judy is very naive. She really thought it was gonna work. However, halfway through the first episode, Jen finds out that Steve, Judy's dead fiancé, is very much alive.
You're Steve.
Yeah?
You're alive.
Hey, Jen. I can explain. Please call me back. I'm so sorry. Please, please, please let me explain.
It turns out that he didn't die. He just broke up with her, and she's been stalking him ever since. It's a real shock for Jen because she realizes in a pretty horrific way that the only person she has managed to open up to since her husband died lied to her and was only pretending to be going through the same thing. She feels betrayed and even more broken, and she closes herself off again, meaning Judy has only made things worse. She made the impulsive decision to go to that group meeting to meet her, but she did not think it through at all, and it blew up in her face. So when Jen confronts her about her lie, Judy kinda panics.
It's very complicated.
No, it's not complicated. Her fiance is not dead, okay? I mean, unless that was his ghost who answered the door last night, because that would be fucking complicated. But it's not complicated, Judy, because he's not fucking dead.
She's immediately put on the spot, so she changes her story and admits that Steve didn't die, but she explains that he broke up with her because she can't have children. This moment is brilliant because since you just met the character and you've just gotten the confirmation that she pulled a terrible lie like a minute ago, it's actually impossible to tell if she's telling the truth or not here. Now, we eventually find out that it's actually true. Steve did break up with Judy because she couldn't have kids and kept having miscarriages, but we also find out there is more to it, and Judy may have left a significant amount of information out of that story, but I'll let you discover that on your own. The point being, from the very first episode, the show kinda lets you know how Judy functions. Every single one of her actions is driven by emotion. She does not think before she acts. Most of the time, she doesn't even know why she's doing the things she does, and she keeps digging a hole for herself because she thinks her only way out of a lie is to lie more. Again, wherever Judy goes, chaos follows. But despite all of that, and that's a testament to the character writing, you just can't help but get attached to her. Because she's too sweet. Judy is really kind and generous and affectionate. She lives to make people smile. She's not a person that ever intends harm on people, but she always finds herself in situations where people are harmed, most likely because of her. Some of the most human moments in this show are about Judy. Sometimes it'll be about something small and very mundane, but she will just make it incredibly meaningful.
Whatever, how does anybody know if they like anybody?
I don't know. I feel like you just like to be around them. You want to be with them. all the time and they make you feel safe.
And other times it'll be something big and life-shattering, and she kind of reminds people what being human is. Like she's the emotional core of the story. Judy has such a big heart. She genuinely tries to do the right thing all the time, but she's also in over her head constantly, and she has no fucking idea what she's doing. And I think that's why this duo is so incredibly effective in terms of dynamic. Jen and Judy are like night and day. They could not be more different. Under normal circumstances, there's no way these two would ever like each other or be friends, but they're both in desperate need of human connection, and their bond kind of transcends everything else. And the most powerful aspect of it is that by being around one another, they learn. They inspire each other to be better. Jen mainly inspires Judy to stand up for herself more, which is something that's very difficult for her to do. Judy has a tendency to let people walk all over her, and she's such a people pleaser that she always takes it with a smile. But with Jen, she kind of learns to value who she is, and she learns that sometimes saying no to something or kind of fighting back is not a bad thing, even if it's not always easy to do. And Jen essentially learns compassion and selflessness from Judy, which is an even stronger arc for her. Jen is not very considerate of other people. She hates everybody, and she does not care if she hurts people's feelings. But through Judy, she learns the importance of the little things. She learns to appreciate them. She learns to enjoy life a bit more. And she learns to sometimes help people, not because it brings her something, but because it will make someone's day. She learns that she doesn't have to be so serious all the time, and she learns the importance of letting go. As profoundly messed up as it is, because it is literally built on a murder, the friendship between Jen and Judy is fucking beautiful. Like, they nailed it. There's just such a genuine element of affection between these two, and it makes so much sense the longer it goes. But again, from the beginning, you know this friendship is a ticking time bomb, which makes it very stressful to watch. Every time the plot develops in a certain way, you just get incredibly anxious about what that dynamic is gonna turn into, and the writers really manage to keep you on the edge of your seat about it. But also, they're just really funny. I know I've been talking about the more serious aspects of the show, but just to quickly remind you, Dead to Me is hilarious. It is a comedy. Like, this show has a sense of humor that just kills me, and it's not afraid to go for the dark jokes, which I like. But even when it's not swinging for a killer joke, just the interactions between the characters are fucking hilarious. They crack me up so hard.
To what do I owe the pleasure?
Hello, detective. You look well. Your hair is different.
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
The other characters in the show are all great, and the writers put a lot of effort into making them seem as human as possible. What I mean by that is that even when a character is an absolute asshole you cannot fucking stand, you still get to have moments where they're vulnerable and nice, and you can still sympathize with them emotionally. Steve, played by James Marsden, who, by the way, is a really underrated actor. Most people know him because he played Cyclops in the X-Men movies, but like, every time I see him in something, he's always excellent. Anyways, Steve is kind of the third main character of the show. He's Judy's ex, and he is a fucking dickhead. An absolute piece of shit. And while the show is very aware of that, it still makes a point of giving you moments with Steve that make you understand why Judy is so in love with him. I just love characters that feel three-dimensional. They all have layers. There's also this character. He's really cool, but I can't say too much about him because spoilers. The main detective of the show is also incredibly funny. I love her. I am such a sucker for dry humor, and this actress kills it. I was crying laughing at some of her scenes. Overall, the character work in Dead to Me is incredibly strong. It is by far the best element of the show, and it really allowed me to look over some of the flaws in this story because it's just that effective. And because, yes, despite all the praise I have to give to Dead to Me, the show does have its shortcomings. First of all, while the plot is thrilling, it does rely on a lot of conveniences to function. Season 1 is pretty smooth though, you barely notice it, like the pacing is so solid that it just flies by you, it's nothing outrageous. However, Season 2 is where the cracks really start to show, and that's actually my biggest issue with the show as a whole. Season 2. Season 2 of Dead to Me, while still really enjoyable and fun, is a significant downgrade from Season 1. It's all plot related. I think the character work is still incredibly strong in Season 2, but the story kind of gets a little dumb. See, Season 1 is very grounded in its own sense of reality. There are some conveniences here and there, but nothing that seems particularly unrealistic. But Season 2 kind of falls into a ridiculous territory. The plot conveniences almost become funny after a while. There are a few episodes where I was like, well, that's one coincidence too many, isn't it? Like, the show is suddenly asking you to suspend disbelief way more than you were initially supposed to. People do things that seem kind of impossible, or they get away with doing certain things way too easily, and it all feels way too convenient. There are also some choices that were made with certain characters that I did not vibe with. Some characters are changed in a way that feels off, and I'm also thinking of a new character that is introduced that kind of made me roll my eyes. However, I do not want you to write off Season 2 completely, and in my opinion, the people who say Season 2 flat out sucks are completely wrong. Make no mistake, Season 2 has its moments, and those moments are fucking amazing. Despite the fact that it is a significant downgrade from Season 1 as an ensemble, Season 2 does have some of the best moments in the entire show. Judy has by far her most impactful and emotional scene in Season 2, and it is so fucking heartbreaking. I don't really cry when I watch movies or TV. I don't know, I'm just not that type of person. But I have no problem admitting this scene made me tear up. I don't want to say what it is, again, for the sake of spoilers. I think you should experience that on your own. But all I will say is that it's a scene that takes place in a bar, and Judy kind of talks about things she had never really said out loud before. More specifically, there's something that she wanted to do for someone, but she didn't get to do it, and now it's too late, and her heart is just completely shattered. I was speechless in front of this scene, and oh my god, Linda Cardellini's acting in it is out of this world. This woman is a fucking gift. She is so incredibly good. She deserves all the praise she gets for this role, and this scene alone is proof of that. She's already stealing the show in Season 1, but somehow she gets to shine even more in Season 2. No joke, when I first saw this scene, my first reaction was to hit pause, hit rewind, and watch it again like 3 times. It is that good. And I should probably point out that Christina Applegate is also really fucking good as Jen. Like, it's kind of crazy. They are both incredible. I swear, these two fucking brought it with their performances on this show. They're so good. There isn't a single episode where they're not absolutely killing it, especially when they interact with each other. I'm specifically thinking of a scene in the Season 1 finale where Jen and Judy are alone in a room and they have an unexpected confrontation, and they are just acting the fuck out of it. They're just acting at each other the whole time. These two were just born to play these roles. I love them. They're fucking queens. Give them the Infinity Stones. Season 2 also has one of the most unexpected twists I have seen in quite a while. I'm not kidding. I did not see it coming at all, and the way it's executed is so clever because when it happens, you immediately understand that a character in particular is completely fucked. And I was so shocked when I first saw it. Like, it hit me so hard that the only reaction I had was a very long and very nervous laugh. I am such a sucker for clever twists, and this one made me feel oh so satisfied. The whole sequence happens in one very long shot, and you start feeling like something is about to happen, but you can't really figure out what, and then it happens, and you just die inside when you understand the implications of that reveal. I love shit like that. So yeah, season 2 of Dead to Me is not as good as season 1, admittedly, and when you're binging the show, you do feel the pretty sharp contrast, but it's still a fun ride with some really powerful moments, and the character writing and the performances are still at an absolute apex. And I'm extremely glad because if you know me, you know I value stories that are allowed to end and not continue forever just for the sake of making money, and it has been confirmed by Liz Feldman, the creator of Dead to Me, that the show will be coming back for a third and final season. I believe they're shooting season 3 right now. They had issues with COVID and production had to shut down, I think, but if everything goes as planned, I'm pretty sure the final season should be out this year, and I, for one, cannot wait to know how it ends. All in all, Dead to Me was a very welcome surprise for me, and I highly recommend you guys check it out if you haven't already. It's not all that popular, which is kind of surprising to me, but I think it deserves way more attention. It's a show that strikes a perfect balance between comedy and drama. It's insanely funny, intelligent, and thrilling. It manages to capture some seriously complex human emotions with some incredibly well-written characters, and it's just such a fun ride, man. There's a lot to enjoy about it. And also, there is so much more to say about this show, but I tried my best to stay away from big spoilers because I don't want to ruin it for you guys if you haven't seen it yet, so I didn't get to say everything I would have liked to say, but trust me, it's a good show. Go watch it. Now somebody please get Linda Cardellini her own movie franchise. She's the only one who can save Hollywood at this point. She's the chosen one. She's a queen. I love her. Okay, never remake Harry Potter. Let's get that out of the way.
Yeah.
No. Expand the universe, cool. Never remake it.
They'll probably make us eventually. You were gonna get a series. They'll redo
probably,
that as a series.
yeah. But my ultimate answer, if Hollywood, look at me. If you dare to ever remake Back to the Future.
Oh no.
I think they would. I think that's on the docket.
No.
I'm gonna.
I wanna dance.